Hello everyone, Coach Carole with you once more for more tech tips for genealogy in 2025. Very recently, in fact just last week, I received an email from Perplexity. Let me show you that email. It got me really excited. Introducing Perplexity Deep Research. Well, I was hooked. I had heard so much about this deep research coming along in most of the AI tools that we now know. So I was keen to see how Perplexity does with its deep research. It said to me that it is the most powerful way to conduct in-depth research and analysis. That sounds perfect for a genealogist, right? Well, it can be perfect for any researcher. Perplexity increases the number of searches, gathers hundreds of sources and reasons through the material to autonomously deliver a comprehensive report. Cuts out a lot of work for me. Sounds great. And as a pro subscriber, I have unlimited access to deep research. So, of course, I was hooked immediately. Coming over now to Perplexity. I just need to close off a few of these wonderful images and show you one of the first things that I wanted to do using deep research. The internet is easily catching up here, so we'll give it a few seconds to come back into view. Too many things open on my desktop as usual. So here is my rather long prompt, and it's about some ancestors whom I have been researching over the last couple of weeks, and they are from the Savage family. And I have been writing up the story of Thomas and Emily and their daughter Martha. And they did some voyaging on the steamships from England to Canada and back again in the 1920s, 1930s and 40s. Now, if you recall, the 1920s was an interesting era, and then into the 30s and 40s, where travel changed completely across the world. The Roaring 20s, if you recall, was during that time that both Thomas and Emily emigrated from England and Wales, in the case of Thomas, to Canada. So I wanted Perplexity to dig deep into the industrial, political and cultural changes in their countries in the 1920s, 30s, 40s and 50s, and help me shape their lives to write up their story. My last instruction here was do this step by step and ask questions after each one. And it has done that. Let's scroll down, you'll see that there are a number of sources that it's picking up on, which I can click into immediately if I want to go off and find out more. And then it goes into the answer about the Savage family's journey through turbulent times and gives me a wonderful narrative that I can weave into the story of this family group. On the right are some of the images that it has brought up for me. And that particular one is of one of the ships of the Canadian line that Thomas and Emily sailed on. So that was of interest. And I was able to open that up by clicking on the link. So it does a whole range of things for you. It would be interesting to see the process in the deep research. It doesn't actually show its process here after it is finished. So I wanted to show you what it does in real time. I'm in a special space called deep research. So I'll just click back into that one and you can see that that's the first conversation that I had with deep research. I wanted to show you a few of the other things that are most important when you're using deep research, and especially with your spaces. You've probably heard me say it before, but you can give your spaces some instructions, like this over here that I've given to deep research. As you begin your deep research and unpack your process in responding to these prompts, please pause and provide more detail. I can edit that, provide a brief summary of the steps you'll take in your process, then provide the answer in a professional and educational manner that appeals to a genealogist and researcher. So my space is called Deep Research. The description is Deeper Conversations and Research on Genealogy and Literature. It's currently private, I haven't shared it with anyone, and its model that it's going to use is Deep. Any changes I make, I simply update. The space will also allow you to include files. So I've uploaded some files about the Savage family, 2 of those, some patterns of migration for people from Wales, and infographics on travels from Find My Past, which I had found from this first conversation. So now that I have all of that in place, I can ask another question. I make sure that it's using deep research here, but here are your other choices. And it includes Pro, Deep, Reasoning, and Reasoning with O3, which is OpenAI's newest model. We'll remain with deep research so that you can see how it works for us today. Now that I have brought in a prompt for Perplexity using deep research, we can watch as it will go through its paces in answering this request. And it's all about the migration patterns from the 1920s to the 1950s. With the aid of some of these resources that I've uploaded for the space, and you can see them over here. There were multiple ocean crossings for the couple during that time between the United Kingdom and Canada. And so I'm now looking for details to fill in my story. So I'm asking it to please research, describe and analyse the experiences of the couple on these crossings. And letting it know that I'm particularly interested in what they experienced on leaving from the Liverpool docks and arriving at St. John, New Brunswick, and vice versa, as well as their accommodation on board the ships of the Canadian Pacific Line. Put that in there. It was also all right, so now we have a fairly full, deep conversation to have. Let's watch how it handles this. So first of all, it gets the desktop notification and lets me know that it's going to take a few minutes to complete. It says I'll start by preparing a research plan. Now this will take a few seconds, as it says. So at this point, we do need to be patient. So it's now looking for its sources, and we can see it top 6 of them up here. Then it says, okay, I need to help the user dig deeper into the migration patterns for the family, the experiences on the voyages, and looking at the search results for the user's story. Need to weave in their personal experience And the challenge is to connect the personal stories with general migration patterns. So as you'd see, it's unpacking everything that pertains to this deep research, given the data that I have provided for it. And here is the answer. You can see here that it's looked at the story that I've uploaded, the research notes I've uploaded, and here is the answer. So it's quite comprehensive, looking at the migration and maritime journeys of Thomas and Emily. Already you've got a fairly comprehensive heading for the story. Then it goes into details that it's found in those documents. The ships have included the SS Montclair, the Duchess of Richmond, and later the Empress of France and the Empress of Canada. So it's very skillfully got those details, extracted them from my notes, and then gone into some segmented answers about the experiences for the Canadian Pacific Line in post-World War I migration context. And throughout this, it's given us index items to go and have a look at various documents that refer to that part of its answer. This one is about St. John as an immigrant city between 1851 and 1951. And that's a PDF document that I could download. Then it goes on to explore the different details that it found about the couple and what was noted on passenger lists, etc. And there was an interesting point that both Thomas and Emily immigrated to Canada on the same ship, but 1 year apart. Emily first in 1924 and Thomas in 1925. And I had that information in the story and in the research notes. It then describes the Canadian Pacific Line crossings to St. John and Quebec and Montreal, and gives me wonderful details such as the number of passengers that it frequently ferried across the oceans. Then some experiences about embarking from Liverpool, especially the departure and third-class accommodations for this steamship. As my couple were not wealthy, they would have been in various third-class passenger accommodations on that ship. It tells me that third-class accommodations on the Canada Pacific vessels were austere, sharing berths, communal washrooms and dining halls serving basic meals like stew and porridge. Sound very appetizing. And then it goes on to talk about life aboard the Montclair and tells me that it was a 7 to 10 day voyage. Useful pieces of information that I can weave into my story. Social dynamics of steerage, multilingual passengers, communal card games, and impromptu musical gatherings. Then return voyages and shifting fortunes, especially for the ships, the Duchess of Richmond, and what it meant for Thomas and Emily, who had established themselves in Toronto, and they were on a return journey to England aboard the Duchess of Richmond in 1939. And this voyage, during the Great Depression's peak, underscores their financial stability, which I hadn't thought about. Yes, they would have needed to have had financial stability in that time. And then further on, their post-World War II journeys across the oceans on the Empress of Canada in 1948, which now includes their daughter. About the ship, about their details for them. And then for the Empress of Canada, describes the amenities, which now include cinemas, nurseries, and afternoon tea services, catering to families like the Savages. Then we look at ports of arrival, St. John, Montreal, and Quebec. Their first destination was St. John's, and when they alighted from the boat, they would have undergone medical inspections at Sand Point's immigration shed. In fact, I need to verify. Let's see what it gives me there. All right, it's in that PDF about St. John as an immigrant city, something I can check on. Then post-war arrivals in Quebec and Montreal. And these were hubs for tourist class travellers. Told me about Montreal's Windsor Station, which facilitated direct rail connections to Toronto, bypassing St. John's diminished post-war role. So we're now coming back up to speed about what changes they would have noted during their multiple crossings. And then it goes into an analysis of the migration patterns and class mobility. Economic migration in the 1920s, Depression-era resilience in the 1930s, and post-war family travel in the 40s and 50s. It gives me a little conclusion that I can use or not use in my story, but it sums it up beautifully. Say that Thomas Hugh and Emily May Wilkinson's romantic journeys epitomise the interplay of personal ambition and historical circumstance, and on. So I'm very happy with this outcome from that long prompt, and you can see how deeply it has gone into this. I could make a copy of this, and I can do that by simply scrolling through and highlighting it, and then copy it, paste it into my Google Docs. I will do, because this will give me even more information about my story that I can include for the Savage family. All right, I'll just show you a couple of the documents that I brought up before that I was able to interrogate, which gave me the idea for that prompt. One of them was about the patterns of migration, especially from the Welsh context. And that one was really useful because it covered not just the era I was interested in, but earlier and later on, and some wonderful old pictures to go with it. Really colours in the family history storytelling part. Passenger lists. This one from the Genealogist shows us a little bit of detail about the various passenger steamships from the 1930s and how we recorded the voyages during the 30s. Came up with this picture of the Empress of Britain, which would have been similar to the ships that my ancestors migrated on. And then Perplexity. I now have 2 conversations in my space called Deep Research. And I can keep adding to these and come back for more information to fulfill the story for my Savage family ancestors. I hope that you can have a look at Deep Research. Think about what you're going to ask of it, what documentation you can provide for it, and how you're going to scope the instructions for it. I really like this simplistic way of instructing it because it seemed to follow that very easily in both those responses. I'll be back with more tech tips for you later.